My friends, good day. Sometimes in personal revolution, how to break social programming, you feel things aren't going well and realize you try but fail, that you are someone who has always worked, who has always studied, who has always made efforts. But in reality, you see that maybe you don't get paid, you don't get a reward that matches the efforts you're putting in. And today, I come to talk to you. I would like to tell you or wake you up to the idea that this is the result of a system. The system is set against you. But then be careful. My goal is not to come and cry with you. It's not to come and discourage you by saying, well, the system is programmed so that it's made to cause failure. So that's how it is and not otherwise. No, that's not my goal. That's not my message. My message is to wake you up to this mechanism. Let's take some examples. Let's talk. This video will seem to go in all directions, like my videos often do, by the way, but it has an important guiding thread. I'm going to give examples, definitions, and talk about certain situations. And ultimately, what's my goal? It's to make you aware, to open your eyes to the phenomena, to the hidden issues that exist. In the end, it's like a rigged game. I'm showing you how the game is rigged. Once you open your eyes to it, then you can act better to defend your interests. That means once you open your eyes, you can have your own personal revolution. You must become a true revolutionary, not necessarily in the collective sense of the word like Fidel Castro, but that you become a revolutionary in the personal sense of the word. That you take back control of your life, that you take back control of your freedom on every level. And we'll see that one of the freedoms in the context of this video, one of the most important freedoms is economic freedom. And I'll tell you why. It's not just a matter of money, it's much deeper than that. And you'll understand as we go further in this video. So before we go any further, I'd like to maybe start with an example that comes to mind. Imagine the following thing. It's just one here, just to start. It's just a lamp. Look, there's nothing special about it. It's just an ultra powerful lamp. By the way, it's a diving lamp. It's a metal object that I wear from time to time. It has a reassuring side to it like that. But there's no other symbolism involved. So I was telling you, imagine the following situation. We have two women who are each 20 years old, two 20-year-old women. One of them, for example, lives in a remote place, let's say somewhere near Eritrea. She wakes up in the morning, her family, she has a mother who doesn't work, she has a father who goes somewhere to look for work every day. A different job at construction sites or similar places. He does manual labor, correct? She lives in a village with huts made of straw or something similar. There are no roads, it's just dirt tracks, you see? And then she gets up in the morning, puts her brother on her back, and then she walks to a well. Every day starts by walking for miles, pulling a cart, and in her cart there are jerry cans. She gets to a well, waits in line with many villagers, fills the barrels, and comes back home around noon. That's every day, that's how she lives. Now, let's take another 20-year-old woman. So keep the first one in mind because I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to talk about a second one. The second one is German. She lives in Berlin. She lives in an upscale neighborhood. Her dad works, let's say, the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, which is very well known. She's studying piano because she would really like to join that orchestra one day. She has her mother who works in the German federal administration at the Bundestag. They have a Tesla. That's their life. And in the evening, when night falls, these two women go to sleep. And before going to sleep, I'm going to tell you something. Watch out for the question that's coming. There's one who, when she's about to fall asleep, starts to feel anxious. That's been going on for a long time. She starts to feel anxious about climate change, you know? She starts thinking about the climate. She has ideas like that, and she saw pictures of bears, and she wonders how things will turn out for those bears. And what if in the future ecosystems won't be completely destroyed by humans and their greed? And all that, you see? So there's a girl, one of the two, who has these kinds of thoughts before going to sleep. So the question I'm asking you today is, in your opinion, which one has those thoughts? Is it the girl who lives in Eritrea, right? Or is it the young German girl from Berlin? There you go then. There are always exceptions. But you know, it's like fish. There are fish that fly, but that doesn't mean all fish fly. You'll never see a whale flying. You need a jet engine, but you get it. You answered that is the German woman who thinks like that. And why did you answer that way? By answering like that, you're actually validating a very important concept. It's a concept rooted in each of us. It's a concept of philosophical materialism. What does that mean? It means that human consciousness is created by their material conditions. What I'm saying is very harsh. It's really extremely harsh. But the reality is that the consciousness of each human is created by the material conditions in which they live. You can always find exceptions. You can always find someone who has taken a vow of poverty, who is broke, who lives in a cave, who has read thousands of books, who is a wise man, it can happen. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's like the flying fish. The flying fish exists, the flying whale doesn't exist. So in practice, for millions of people around the world, that's how it goes. The other problem with this is that if we look at philosophy, if we look at human philosophy, the greatest philosophers, we can always find exceptions, of course. We'll realize that these were people who were in their society, let's say, who were part of the privileged class. They were rich and well-established people, as we say, right? Who were able to access a certain number of noble arts. Some were involved in music, literature, politics. They would give speeches in parliaments, all that. And they also did philosophy. You see, so philosophy actually, when you look at the major philosophical movements, maybe that's the case. You can argue for it, but the opposite can also be argued. It's potentially philosophy, maybe it's the concern of the ruling classes, after all, right? Just to mention it in passing, we'll leave it aside. We might discuss it in another video if, of course, you're interested in this one. To show me that you're particularly interested in this video, please leave me some likes, subscribe, leave a comment, whatever it inspires in you. If you have any questions, that's how it is for me personally. These are things that are always on my mind. I don't talk about it all the time. I don't talk about it constantly. But it underlies the actions in my life. It underlies all the videos I make. It underlies the books I write. It's always there in the background, even if I talk about it so bluntly, which is pretty rare. But if you want me to talk about it more, show me. Okay, now let's put that aside. Philosophical materialism will underlie the rest of the video. We'll come back to it. In particular, for example, one of the great, the grandmaster of philosophical materialism is, of course, Karl Marx. Marxism, very briefly, in parentheses, is the critique of the capitalist world. And when I say critique, what's the title of his book? Das Kapital, Capital. What's the subtitle? It's Critique of Political Economy. Be careful with the word critique. It doesn't just mean to say bad things or attack, like criticizing your clothes or work. In common usage, to criticize often means to say something negative about someone. Critique doesn't really mean that if you look closely at the definition, like when we say a food critic doesn't just visit restaurants and criticize them. He critiques the food, he analyzes it, he breaks it down, he comments on it. Art critic, it's the same. Film critic, it's the same. You see, a film critic can give a movie a 9 out of 10 on Internet Movie Database, yet he's still a critic. Critique, in the sense of taking something apart. And if you look, there are a lot of books called that. Take Immanuel Kant, for example, when he wrote his book, Critique of Pure Reason. Critique of Pure Reason. Critique, that word keeps coming up. Many philosophers have started books that way because they wanted to begin a critique. In a thorough analysis, Sartre wrote Critique of Dialectical Reason. You see, he also tackled a critique. So, very important, critique doesn't mean to break or destroy or say I'm against it. That's not it at all. The book Critique of Dialectical Reason is by Sartre, not Karl Marx. Critique of Political Economy. It's a book that will dismantle the system completely and analyze the capitalist system. What do we do with it? What's the purpose of this book? Do what you want. It's just a tool. With this, you can become a Fidel Castro. You can become a Che Guevara. You can become a Vietnamese running in the rice fields. You can also become Donald Trump. It's up to you. It's a tool, and it's a tool that is unfortunately little understood, little used by the majority of people. And for good reason, because the majority of people are subjected to the discourse of the ruling classes who tell them, above all, don't touch that. You can find millionaires who have original editions of this book at home, and you can find people who live on minimum wage. Yeah, you see, Marxism, well, I'm not interested in it, even though Marxism is what shows you the chains you have on you, how they work, what they're connected to, and maybe after that, it's up to you to find a way to break them. Once it shines a light on those chains and shows them to you, you see that's all it is. It's just an intellectual tool like any other, and we're using it today. So now when we look at it, and maybe that's one of the invitations this video offers for personal revolution, when we look at Marx, he's often compared to Hegel. He was a philosopher. He studied Hegel a lot. And at first he was aligned with him, but very quickly he completely changed compared to Hegel. When discussing dialectics, what's the difference between Marxist and Hegelian dialectics? Well, okay, here, I'm going to give some very simple, very concrete examples that everyone can understand. I don't want to come before you and make videos with complicated terminology that excludes most people. Some say, what is he talking about? I didn't understand. No. Revolutionary discourse, whether it's about personal revolution or collective revolution, must be understood by everyone. So it has to be accessible. It's not a speech that's going to come off as pretentious with words that don't mean anything. Yes, Hegelian dialectic. No, no. I'll tell you very simply what Hegelian and Marxian dialectic means. You'll understand it very quickly. In 2 minutes, you'll get it. Look, the heart of the Hegelian dialectic is what we call, we've all done this at school, thesis, antithesis. Can you guess the third? It's the synthesis. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's the Hegelian dialectic, but be careful, that's the main issue. It's not something that comes only from school. It's not a school thing. It's not just a matter of, well, there you go. I'm at school to please the professor. He gave me a topic and I have to start with a thesis. So defend the antithesis, say the opposite, give the points against that topic. And the synthesis, try to marry the two, merge them, and come up with a harmonious solution. That's not it. It was sold like that, but that's not it. The Hegelian dialectic is Hegel's way of seeing the great forces that exist in this world. What he saw was that there is a current, let's say a social one, for example. There is a social current that comes along that starts to carry society in a certain direction. Did you find it? I don't know myself. Today, let's discuss woke discourse, like wokeism, which is spreading globally in business, universities, and the media. Then on the other side, you'll start to see some resistance. You'll start to have people, those we call conservatives, the right, traditionalists or similar, names, sometimes even insults that people call each other. So you have something facing each other, right? And then we arrive at a new situation where the two have merged, the two have synthesized, and we have a synthesis. That's the societal vision of Hegel, if you will. That's how he saw the world. But then, what is the Marxist view of the world? If I have to use Hegelian terminology, how could I define Karl Marx? Karl Marx, it's like this: thesis, antithesis. It stops there. If you want thesis, antithesis, revolution, thesis, antithesis, both destroyed. Do you want proof? It's very simple. You look for a text that is the most influential text in the history of humanity. All right? I'm not talking about the Bible here. I'm talking about the Communist Party Manifesto, which was written by Karl Marx, and also by his associate Charles Engels. Charles Engels. I don't remember if his name was Charles. Engels. Roughly speaking, I don't remember the exact date, but there's a very important piece of information in it. He says, I'll just give you an example. He says the history of the world, or the history of humanity or of the world. Up until now, the written history of the world is nothing but the struggle of classes. So class struggle. Thesis and antithesis mean one class represents the thesis, the other the antithesis. We're using Hegelian terminology, but we're not in Hegelian philosophy. One class and another, so the class of oppressors, and the oppressed, you see, oppressors and oppressed, thesis, antithesis. So what's the result? You'll see the result isn't a synthesis. I'll show you the rest soon. You'll see that the result isn't just that. The two classes, the oppressors and the oppressed, come together, sit at a table, and then find a way to resolve their conflicts and contradictions. And then finally, they come up with a synthesis. No, that's not it. They might create a synthesis, but it will be artificial, unstable, and won't last. Because of these internal contradictions, it will eventually collapse. It's like when you mix oil and vinegar, for example, you're going to mix them. You can just use a fork and beat them well for a few seconds. You feel like you've succeeded, like you've managed your synthesis, but actually it's something that resists synthesis. They will end up separating. So the next part of the text I'm talking to you about. So he says that the history of the world up until now has only been the struggle of classes. So oppressor and oppressed, this struggle sometimes hidden, sometimes open. It has always ended, either by the destruction of both classes in struggle or conflict, or by the revolutionary transformation of society as a whole. You see, there's no thesis here, there's no synthesis, there's the destruction of both. And that's where we have a difference. We have a discourse from Hegel, which is a progressive discourse where we have two opposing systems that will eventually, and it's so that they teach us at school that it's completely false. Well, there's no such thing as false or true. It's not something we observe in practice. It's that these two systems will eventually end up sitting together and then create a synthesis. Whereas in logic or in Marxist dialectics, that's not the case. The systems will end up killing each other, destroying one another. Both will destroy each other. And then what happens is that there can be a complete destruction of society and a revolutionary transformation of it. So you see the elements I'm giving you here is to awaken in you the vision of these mechanisms and to start developing a revolutionary consciousness that you can use in your personal life. It's very important. I know people, I've met some in Dubai and Mauritius and so on, people who have made very large multi-million-dollar fortunes. And actually, even though I'm aware that it's not everyone's aspiration, I think that a bit of freedom, economic freedom, for example, is something everyone aspires to, especially if we go back to the example of the German woman and the girl who lives in Eritrea. Economic conditions end up defining our consciousness. It could also destroy it, but that's another discussion, not necessarily a Marxist one, though it could be. So maybe I'll give one, maybe I'll give another. I was saying I meet people here and elsewhere, and these are people who have gone through their own personal revolutions. These are people who are Marxists without knowing it. Because these are people who tell you, I was fed up, I was in France, I was in the United Kingdom, I was, I don't know where, in Spain, in Belgium. I felt exploited. They were taking the fruit of my labor, even if that's not necessarily the terminology they would use. But can you sum it up like that? And at some point, I decided to break my chains. I decided to free myself from this system. As he says, there's a YouTuber I sometimes watch named Nomade Capitaliste. He's the only capitalist. Still, his message is purely Marxist. Not really, because the Marxist message is a critique of capitalism, a critical critique. I defined the word earlier. So there isn't really a big difference between a Marxist message and a capitalistic message. It just depends on which point of view you take, that's all. But basically, we're talking about exactly the same thing. He says, nomade capitaliste. Your first step to free yourself is to leave the system, to get out of that system. He, for example, doesn't want to hear about those people who say, yes, I'm going to create a plan d'épargne on actions and do this and invest in this thing and do that. And he has such a mechanism. There's a certain law, there's a certain decree that allows you to get tax breaks, that allows you to. He doesn't want to hear about that. The only thing he wants to hear, you want to free yourself from a system. You take your things, you pack your bags, you leave that system. I'll talk to you in another video about what to do if you can't leave the system. Because I'm aware, because I'm also realistic that you can't always leave a system, but what do you do if you can't leave it? There are solutions that aren't perfect, that are intermediate solutions, but there are possibilities. I'll talk to you about it in another video if you want. So as I was saying, the people I meet are people who are in a purely Marxist mindset. They want to break their chains. They want to reclaim the fruits of their labor, to reclaim their freedom, their time with their children, their time with their family, their physical health, their mental health. We're discussing a revolutionary discourse. They've experienced a personal revolution, even if they don't call it that. So I'll continue. I'm going to tell you about another example that connects to the first one, but in a more collective context. At the beginning, I talked to you about awareness. I talked about two girls, one in Germany, one in Eritrea. Today, I'd like to talk to you, for example, about the United Kingdom. You'll see, I'm going to describe a very particular situation to you. In the United Kingdom, if you look, the country has a very strong obsession that no longer needs to be proven. For banks and for loans, society lives on loans. You arrive on a street and see houses that I guarantee belong to banks. And the people who live in them pay monthly installments to the banks. Installments, by the way, vary greatly with Bank of England interest rates, which means that the United Kingdom is still living in the Victorian era, hasn't modernized this system, and households have to absorb the shocks of the country's financial policies, which is still extremely serious. It doesn't happen like this in practically any country, any developed country today, but it still happens over there like that. It belongs to the banks. The cars parked in front belong to the banks. You enter the houses, open closets, and see clothes bought on credit. Christmas is coming. The gifts under the tree were bought with consumer loans, credit cards, and so on. So actually, it's life on credit. In the credit-driven logic of life, we chose to financialize everything. Everything has to be an excuse to create a credit opportunity for the banks. I'll give you, for example, studies. In many countries around the world, it's considered strategic. It's a matter of life or death for a nation. Allow your young people, brilliant, motivated, who are 18, who are 19 and a half, who want to go study, become doctors, become engineers, become something. You must allow them, even if it means taking a loss. Figure it out. Tax people, sell oil, sell gas, sell anything, deprive yourself of other things, do whatever it takes. Figure it out so that these young people can study. In many countries around the world, what they do is that you can study sometimes for 5 years, 10 years. You can study simply by paying registration fees. You go with a birth certificate, a photo, you arrive at the office, stamp, that's it. And then you get your student card in the office next door. It's as simple as that. That's not the case in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has decided to turn education into a privilege for the elite. People have to pay tens of thousands of euros a year for the privilege of studying. Why? Because the state isn't interested in educating future generations, but only in imprisoning as many people as possible in a debt system that benefits the banks. So that's the story. When you arrive in the United Kingdom, you'll find that, for example, when you go to the hospital, you'll see that the majority of the hospital staff are of foreign origin. The doctors are there's a very strong ethnicization. Many professions are almost entirely so. I'm not saying exclusively, but you get my point. They're from India. You'll meet nurses from Nigeria, Senegal, Laos, Vietnam, and more. From time to time, you come across an Australian doctor that you recognize by his accent, or even an American doctor. But I think that in my life, after living 18 years in the United Kingdom, I must have seen, let's say, maybe 3 or 4 brilliant British doctors. Still, they exist, but it's very rare. It's an ultra minority. On the other hand, if you go to the supermarket checkouts, you go to a supermarket, you go to a Tesco, for example, you'll have a hard time to find an Indian working there. Okay, it's British people, it's locals who work in those most precarious jobs. Why? Because their country doesn't give them the opportunity to study. So what does that create? It inevitably creates that. A country that doesn't train, that doesn't give its children opportunities, has to bring in the professionals it needs from abroad. This creates waves of immigration that cause dissatisfaction among locals, which creates a rift within the country, a very significant societal divide. It becomes an election and societal issue, causing tensions. And then, well, you have the country as you can see it, which is now unrecognizable. What does that tell us? It tells us that choices, and this is very important, this was defined by Karl Marx, or rather observed, not defined. He didn't define anything at all, he observed, and he was a very sharp observer. In fact, the economic choices we make don't just define who will become rich, who will become poor, who will make money, who will lose it. No, that's not it. They end up defining who we are. They end up defining who we are as people, like I told you at the beginning of the video, but also as a society, as a nation, as a country. You see, you make purely economic choices. You just have to decide, for example, that, well, studies, I want them to be at least 25,000 euros per year. And then, well, we're going to bring in partner banks and they'll lend money. 30 years later, you have the United Kingdom. You don't even know how you got there. You made an economic choice. And the economic choice is necessarily a societal choice. You don't necessarily see the result right away, but you see it later. The economic choices we make as a nation end up defining us as individuals too. By the way, I'm telling you about this. So let's move on. If you look today, there are several ways to do things, just like there have always been several ways to do things. I'll give you a simple example. Back when there was, for example, slavery had its defenders. There were people who said it was great. Many benefited because they owned slaves. Others said with fatalism, yes, but you can always criticize slavery. But I don't see another system. I mean, it's a perfect system. It's been around for centuries or even millennia. I just don't have any other solutions at hand. That's fatalism. There are others who were people who could say, well, maybe they were following a Hegelian logic. And they said, we can humanize it. We can make a better Europe. We can humanize it. We can, for example, make sure there are no corporal punishments, or maybe ones that are a little less violent. Maybe we should make the slaves work a little less, right? Make the work days a little shorter, allow longer breaks, maybe give better food. You see, there you're using a Hegelian argument. We're looking for a synthesis. We're going to try to work with them, you see, to meet them halfway, you see. And then you have the radical argument. The radical argument is, no, we're going to destroy it. There is no slavery. You don't have the right to own humans. You don't have the right to sell them. No, that doesn't exist. It will stop immediately. That's the radical argument. So let me tell you something. In society, in the state it's in today, it's going to be very hard for you to find people who will give you radical arguments. People are, it's like they've been, there's someone I met recently who told me they've become fiscal cattle. You can define a lot of things in a fiscal way. It's like, for example, do you know about the fiscal horsepower of a car? Those aren't the steam horsepower. It's not necessarily the power the engine gives. For example, you can use engine displacement to define fiscal horsepower, which is then taxed. You can also have, in a definition, fiscal livestock, people who are there and have been programmed to keep going. In a single system, in a system that crushes them, that destroys them, they are destroyed from generation to generation. Children are born knowing they will be destroyed, but we keep producing the same system. Until when? Knowing that the system itself is collapsing, this system, despite everything it has taken, ends up collapsing. It's like the slave system. With all the people it took, it transferred them from one country to another, killing half of them along the way and all that. He managed to go bankrupt and collapse. It's good, but still crazy. Systems inevitably collapse due to their contradictions. We can help a bit, just give a small push to speed things up. But fundamentally, what we can do is try to do that on a personal level, try to make our own personal revolution. By developing an awareness, relationships that are there, by developing awareness. In fact, you have to elevate yourself. Before that, you're going to go against the current. Because if I go back to the central thesis of this video, it's that circumstances or material conditions are going to define our consciousness. But there's something you have to do, which is to define your own consciousness, reshape your consciousness before your material conditions change. But ultimately, when you redefine your consciousness, your material conditions will change. As your relationship to the world and things changes, you will become a different person because there are choices. These choices shape us as a society, a nation, and as individuals. Maybe I'm talking to you about one. One last point that's very important in this video. For example, you can interpret things in different ways. There are several ways to read things. That's why earlier when I said it's false, I stopped myself and said, no, there's no false or true. Just like in this video, it's not true, it's not false. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing. It's an interpretation that happens at a certain level. Are there other possible interpretations? Of course there are. Of course there are. If you look, I made a video maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll link it below this one. It's a video that talks about a number of life issues. And it's purely within a Nietzschean dimension, purely in that dimension, that the whole video stays on a very straight line of Nietzschean dialectic. Actually, when you have a problem, and that's very powerful, because beyond that, beyond this video where you can agree or disagree, that's not the point. We need to get out of this reflex of saying, I agree. Yes, he's right, he's wrong. That's not it. That contaminates our minds. It uses our resources in the wrong way. Let me tell you something. Look, when there's an issue you want to address, which could be a problem, doesn't matter if it's personal or national, it doesn't matter. You have to read it on several levels. There are several ways to look at it. There might be an idealized way to see it, a romantic way to see it, a Hegelian way, a Marxist way, a Christian way, you see, a Nietzschean way to see it. And I could completely re-record this video and take a purely Nietzschean view of exactly the same phenomena I just talked to you about. You see, it would be different, but then it would be different. But then who's wrong? Who's right? That's not the question, it's the solution is found. Maybe here I'll suddenly turn Hegelian. There, the solution is probably found in the harmony of all the elements, all the levels, all the strata. All right, it's a bit, I'm using the show parenthesis, I won't go into it, maybe a bit Kabbalistic as well. There are several levels of interpretation, there are several degrees of interpretation, and each degree of interpretation brings us enrichment, brings us meaning. There is no level of interpretation that is exhaustive, that provides meaning in such a way that we no longer need the others. But in reality, you have to read several levels. And then when you combine them all, you have something that maybe gets closer to reality or to something energetically true, not necessarily true. I don't think humans can access the truth with a capital T. That's dialectical Kantian. But what is possible is to have, for example, imagine several lights coming onto a prism that will converge. You have the lights of the rainbow converging on a prism, and then you have a white light on the other side, you have pure white lights. Okay, so it's this convergence that will create light, and white light contains all the others, so the solution that is energetically true at our level contains all the others, all other interpretation levels. So, as I was saying, we're going to continue. And maybe I'll give you a practical example. We're going to talk about couples. Is there a way to look at today's couples from a philosophical materialism perspective? We could view today's couples from a Freudian perspective, or from a Christian perspective, or from a Muslim perspective, or from any perspective. It doesn't matter. But we're going to study it from a Marxist perspective. Does that mean it's the only way to look at it? No, that's not true. It's one of the perspectives where there's energy and you make it converge. It might provide something close to a solution energetically. It's just about energy, okay? So let me tell you something, what we are, because why don't I want true or false? He agrees, he doesn't agree. Because, you know, if you allow me, just in parentheses, maybe I put myself in a Christian frame of reference. You know that most people aren't bad enough or evil enough to deserve hell, and most aren't good enough to deserve heaven. You see what I mean? Most things are in between. Most of the things around us are energetically neither true nor false. It's in between. Some are more false, others more true. But you see, absolute truth and absolute falsehood are not accessible to us. One is the mirror of the other in a way. Because if you could access absolute falsehood through its mirror image, you could access absolute truth. Do you see what I mean? That's why you can't access either, since accessing one unlocks the other. Okay, that goes beyond, it might even be beyond the dimension we live in. But let's get back to our story. Because I don't want to forget it. This isn't a scripted video. I don't have any paper. I don't have anything. So right now, I'm following a path, and it's a very fragile path. I have to stay on track. So, as I was saying, let's think about the story of a couple today. So you have the husband who works. He goes out to work. Let's say the wife is a homemaker. Let's consider a typical couple from the 50s or 60s before women started working. Then we'll make it evolve. Don't worry, we'll make it move. We'll bring it to today, to our place now. So if you take that couple, what does the man know? The man goes out to work. Work in what kind of system? Working in a system, let's say a capitalistic one, means he's in the oppressed class. He goes to work. He will provide a surplus of value that will be captured by his employer and also by the state. Once he gets money in hand, he will distribute it around to small capitalists. He'll pay rent to one, gas to another, and car payments to another, leaving him with almost nothing, right? So that's it. That's the life of the husband. Now, what does the life of the housewife look like? And here, I'll tell you something. I think that statistically, this channel is watched more by men than by women. We may get a few comments from women, but not many. But let me tell you something. Look at the housewife. What kind of system does she live in? Look at the man. Since he's the one working and earning money to pay rent, buy, or provide whatever is needed, provide a house, he'll provide a kitchen, he'll provide a washing machine, and then he'll provide a washing machine, for example. So what will come out of the washing machine? We're going to have clean laundry coming out of the washing machine. He comes in, he works, he throws his shirt in, and the next day it comes out clean from the washing machine. It's even ironed. There's just an iron in its box. The iron can't iron by itself. But what will happen is that she will do the ironing. He'll go to the supermarket and bring back ingredients like tomatoes, carrots, raw meat, spices, herbs, and more. And he has a meal on his table. You realize that there is value creation. The woman's tip. There is added value being created. Who benefits from the added value? She benefits from part of the added value because she eats too. You see, when she prepares this meal, she's going to eat some of it too. When she washes her husband's clothes, she washes hers too. So you see, she benefits from it partly, but he benefits too, and the children benefit as well. What kind of system is that? Maybe I'm taking you back a little. Back in the days of feudalism, there was the feudal lord. The feudal lord was a landowner, for example. Back then, you couldn't simply buy land. It belonged to feudal lords who were often from the nobility, close to ruling families. And then they practically owned all the land. All the land belonged to them, sometimes won in a battle 500 years ago by sending the peasants to get killed. So, as I was saying, they owned the land. And then, like them, they rejected. As I said earlier in the video, they preferred to do philosophy, politics, music, powdering their faces and going to laugh out loud at parties. You can imagine that going to pick up potatoes with their bare hands isn't really their thing because their hands are too delicate. Getting up at 5 in the morning, taking the cow out of its pen and all that, and going to do the manure work or something like that, that's not really their thing. So what do? They do this. There's a guy who goes to their place. So to the feudal lord's place, that's it. He goes to him, the feudal lord, and he says this to him. You have some land over there, behind the forest, near the mountain. You have some land, about 10 hectares, all right? So what I would like is for you to give me that land, give it to me. And then what I'll do is this. I'm going to work the land. I'm going to grow things in it by planting tomatoes. And then I'll share the fruit of my labor with you. Because the land, you're the one who brought it. I don't have it. I'll never own it. So you let me have it. You let me use it. And I'll give you a part of what it produces. And also, I come to work for you as well, because that was often the case in feudalism too. That means he says to you, okay, I give you the land, you keep it, okay? There you go, you and your children. You're going to give me a part of the production. So every time you harvest, you're going to give me a part of the harvest. But also, I would like you to come to my stables, let's say 3 times a week. I would like you to come to my stables, because we also need people to take care of my animals, etc. So you have to. He gives you the tools of production that he owns, because he had the monopoly on the tools of production. Just like today, the capitalist system has the monopoly on the tools of production. See, what do? You go work for him, and in return, he allows you to access a part of the profits. So the woman, let's get back to the woman. The washing machine, okay? Who bought the washing machine? It was bought by the husband, who in this case is kind of a feudal lord, you see? We're in feudalism inside the family. So we have the feudal lord who buys the washing machine, who buys the fridge, the freezer, all that, the tools of production. You see, which he has the monopoly. And then his wife, well, she uses them, and then she provides him with added value. So the husband lives in a system of capitalism. The wife remains in a feudal system. But you'll see, there is a transfer of value between the feudal system and the capitalist system. Why, should I tell you? Let's imagine that the woman doesn't exist in the unconscious, not just in a couple. You can find a guy who lives alone, that's not it. But let's imagine that the woman didn't bring this value, and that the man had to pay for the value that the woman brings. So, for example, every day he would have to take his clothes to a laundromat that would wash them, iron them, all that, and put them back in the closet. He has to pay every night to eat. Well, he has to pay a caterer who has to come to the house to cook for him, and so on. So what happens? It's going to cost him a lot. So the woman is bringing a value that can be defined numerically. With money, we can define it. What is the woman doing? She is indirectly subsidizing capital. Why? Because she is providing a number of services for free. If a man had to pay for those services, he wouldn't be able to work without demanding that his employer pay him much more. It's the employer who should pay for that. But now the employer knows there's a woman at home, and he knows she's providing a lot of services that would normally be very expensive. But he doesn't need to. You see, this man needs these services to live, but the capitalist doesn't need to pay him for them as wages. He knows there's a woman at home who does that for free, so this woman lives in a system. Feudal. Well, she's not only providing her services to her husband, but she's also subsidizing the systems. Capitalistic. You see what I mean? So now where it's going to get worse is that you'll have a woman, for example, later on, who will work. She'll work. So she goes out to work. What will happen? So now she's caught between two systems. When she goes out to work, she's in a capitalist system that will take most of what she earns from her, from the fruit of her labor. See? Just like her husband, she's under the same constraints. But when she comes home, she returns. What does she have to do? She has to quickly cook for the guy who's coming, quickly cook for her child, and all that. So what's going to happen? In the end, she finds herself between two systems. She's drained by one system, capitalistic outside, and she's drained by a system, feudal on the inside. And that's why so many women are exhausted today. So many women, so many couples break up. What's the secret to some couples' longevity? These are couples who say, yes, we do everything together. I help my wife with all the daily tasks and all that. We pool our strengths, we work together, you see? And here you have a couple that looks more like primitive communism, where people did everything together, than a couple that looks like a feudal system, you see? So just look at it from a purely Marxist perspective, based on materialist philosophy or philosophical materialism. You see that we can break down and find relationship problems and understand their origin without even needing to use another level. I'm not saying that if we don't use another level, we wouldn't have access to one. with more information, with more tools, of course, but you saw that even just at this level, we already have a lot of things, you see? We have a lot to say, we have a lot to think about. There you go, my friends. So that's what I wanted to tell you. And I'll finish with one thing. It's that when you look at the level of the revolution, there's a book by Mitterrand that I really like. I have a copy in the United Kingdom that's signed by François Mitterrand himself. In fact, it's called The Permanent Coup. And actually, in this book, he insists, among other things, on the continuity of the revolution. Because, and here maybe I'll do my Fidel Castro impression for you, the revolution, whether it's national or personal, is not just one. And that often misleads us because, you know, when we're children, we have dates on the calendar, we celebrate. And now today it's the celebration of the revolution of, usually we give it a date. Many people worldwide each have a date marked on their calendar, as you'd find if you interviewed them. You'll have them all, 366 days of revolution. In fact, the reality is that revolution is something permanent. As Mitterrand said, the permanent coup d'etat, we talk about the permanent revolution, because just because you've had a personal revolution that at some point you've broken free from a constraint and you made a radical decision, it's most often in radicality that it happens. You make a radical decision. Leaving the United Kingdom was a radical choice, not a Hegelian or synthesized decision. I tried to make one, I was trying to make one. In synthesis, it meant trying to compromise with the system. But there came a time when I needed a revolutionary transformation in my life. At that point, it meant that it was no longer possible. Because what does that lead to? It leads to the destruction of both systems in conflict. So either the collapse of the British state, I wait for it to collapse, though the agony may last and could continue for another 30 years, or I wait for the total destruction of my life, or the other thing. I'm undergoing a major transformation. See, revolutionary change begins by leaving this system. That's when radical action happens. On the other hand, one thing, it's not like, look, you can say yes, but I left the United Kingdom. That's good this year, all of that, that's good. But I already left my country of birth a long time ago. I was 17 when I left my country of birth. So why am I leaving my adopted country? Because the revolution is permanent? That's right. It's not because you took an action. Now, and that this action allowed you to solve a problem and start a journey to change your life. Take back control of your life, your body, your mind, your finances, your income, and everything, everything, everything. It's not that it's not over. The revolution isn't a date on the calendar. I can't just pick the date when I bought the plane ticket, a one-way ticket to leave London and say, that's it, I did the revolution, it's over. It's every day, it's a daily job, every single day. When you break free from one shackle, you'll find another and another. See? It was Shakespeare who said that behind every veil I lift, there's another veil or something like that. That's it. Behind every veil, there's another veil and another veil and another veil. You have to lift them, but as you do, the system tries to put them back on you. While you break one shackle, the system quickly adds another. You see? So that's why you need not only a revolution, but you need a permanent revolution. There you go. So this video here, all right? From the beginning, we were 95% into a Marxist reading of things, like I said. Okay? That doesn't mean there aren't other interpretations where there are also things to say and think about. That's usually when you layer multiple interpretations together. That's when we get to something very interesting. There you go, my friends. If you enjoyed this video, leave me some comments, subscribe to this channel, and like this video. That's your way of telling me that you like my work. That's how I judge. I tell myself, there you go, they're here, they like my work, they're commenting. That means they're interested in that, and I should make more videos like that for them. If I see that it's lukewarm, I tell myself, well, maybe you just gave them content they weren't expecting, or that they don't want, or that they don't want to hear. So it's better to do something else. There you go, my friends. Thank you for listening up to this point to my book, The Great Betrayals, on Amazon, available in Kindle format and also in paperback, as you can see. And soon all my books will be available in Audible format as well. There is the book Toxic, which is already available in Audible format, and there is Astrology, which will also be available in Audible format soon. This way, people who prefer listening to books can do so too. Thank you, my friends, and stay revolutionary. See you very soon.